Yo, how's it going everybody? You guys Sketch here and welcome back to the channel. And on this episode we're continuing down the line of Aero Fighters games by looking at its sequel, Aero Fighters 2, released into the NEO-GEO CD and AES system for the home and arcades in 1994. This is a series developed by Video System and published by SNK, and this entry dials up the intensity even further with more enemies, more weapons, more locations to blast through, and even more explosions. Much like its past entry, the Machine Gun Summit is meeting once again to go worldwide and even into the cosmos. The story is brief since there isn't much time for semantics, but in short, 2 years after the events of Sonic Wings, reports circulate that super weapons were reappearing across the globe while it remains unknown if it were the same threat as the past skirmish. The United Nations have sent for peacemaking measures, which all failed. So on to option B, assembling 8 pilots to destroy their armies once again. Gameplay wise, we've got 10 stages of non-stop action from the rip as you fly through this vertical shoot 'em up. Compared to the first game, the levels here are fairly shorter but do throw a lot of enemies and gunfire your way. Though you're prepared with 8 pilots from around the world and even a dolphin this time around. With your 8 selectable pilots, you'll blast through the stages, and once you finish stage 10, we'll loop through the stages again to see the true boss fight and ending. You've got your base shot and unique Mega Crush Bomb, much like the first installment, except everything here has been dialed up a few notches. As mentioned in our last review of Sonic Wings 1, there's a lot of destructible items in the environment which will reveal the currency bonuses of that region, and it's encouraged to destroy as much as possible as you go along your world tour of destruction, and hopefully push back the enemy threat once again. As far as those unique Crush Bombs, each character has either more offensive or defensive measures to get you through each major boss encounter and otherwise. Each region of pilots has their Crush Bombs either dialed to the offensive or defensive. For example, Japanese pilot Hien has a massive beam blast, whereas Mao Mao can briefly stop time to inflict more damage alone or co-op to down your enemies. So in this area, depending on pilot chosen, you got some options on how you'd like to dispatch your wave of destruction. As you bust through the initial stages, getting to level 10 puts you in a gauntlet of popcorn bullet enemies as well as one set of stocks, or you're going back to the beginning of the stage. There's also a mid-boss here which resurrects the orangutan boss from Aero Fighters 1, and in similar fashion throws a randomizer on the second encounter from there. As far as I've seen, there's a few different final bosses the game can toss your way, with either a ghost that throws various produce at you which can net you bonus points, or a laser spewing mechanical eye which will throw more projectiles at you than a Golden Corral buffet with room for dessert. There's also the possibility of getting a completely harmless giant fish, which is also the rarest occurrence, coming up every few hundred clears. There's also a couple stages in between where you can rack up tons of weapon power-ups and bombs as you fly through an area of only mid-tier adds which drop power upgrades to you for a limited time. These sections are big for getting bonus points as well as getting your firepower on deck for the next encounters. For these parts, shoot down as many enemies as you can and you should be cruising through the next couple stages. Graphics wise, there wasn't much information available as far as how much of a jump this was compared to Aero Fighters 1, but the graphics engine does look fairly similar. Explosions are bigger as well as enemies being a little bit larger than last time, and you get a fair amount more enemies on screen, and there's also a touch less slowdown in most sections. Destructible environments return as you not only shoot down your ops but also demolish landmarks on your world tour. Currencies found along the way will also serve as a marker as to where you are geographically, and numerous landmarks can be destroyed in the interim. There's even a few controversial landmarks that you can and can't destroy, which some games released in this era that have gotten re-released do censor, but not here. You'll still get bonus points for destroyed landmarks, but not all of them actually get destroyed at times, if you get what I mean. Boss and enemy sprites are often massive and will throw some pretty bug fire patterns at you, and while this does have a lot of enemies on screen at once, it doesn't really get into the realm of overwhelming until nearly the end of the game. Base is taken into account as far as your hitbox and the enemy and bullet spread. The screens can get hectic absolutely, but there's usually a way out of those chaotic moments luckily. Environments as a whole don't differ too much here compared to the series' last outing, but it does pepper up the visuals with their attention to detail. Textures and animations seen here are a step above the original, while not changing things up too much, but also ups the ante with more pronounced explosions and fire patterns and coloring along the smooth animation. Sound wise, it's also smoke with some hype tracks as you blast through the game's 10-stage campaign, and a few of these tracks here are pretty bumpin'. The team of Hiroyuki Ito, Norie Aoki, and Soshi Hosoi collectively cook up a soundtrack that's got a good bit of range to it. The level and boss themes here have an afternoon anime while cinematic feel to the tunes, and it works out pretty well, fitting the action while not being too dramatic. And there's a good handful of belters in there, and the tune for stage 10 is pretty epic leading up into the final showdown. Sound effects are standard fleshed out fare like the past game, and has that late 80s, early 90s anime vibe to them, which I can totally appreciate. The sound of the action from downing enemies to grabbing power-ups all sound pretty good here, and while there's no spoken dialogue or radio chatter, the unique subtitled character dialogue and endings also added the replay value since based on certain mix-ups in characters chosen, the character dialogue will be different each time. Aero Fighters 2, much like the first game, is more of the same, just dialed up to the next level, and this out of the 2D games is my personal favorite. It's got the familiar action and set pieces of the last game with even more ops and sites to destroy. The cast of characters are quite amusing and offer up a lot of gameplay variation and challenges. Running the game with 2 players offers up even more hilarity with the cutscenes and endings. While it's a short run, even with the loops, you can still have a really good time with this this one. Aero Fighters 2 gets an 8.5 out of 10 and comes recommended to shoot 'em up fans, especially vertical shoot 'em ups, since this is a staple of the genre, I'd say. It's not the end-all be-all of shoot 'em ups, but it's a contender for one of the best NCK published shooters, and is certainly worth checking out. We will round out the 2D entries relatively soon and take a look at Aero Fighters 3 in the near future. This is available physically on the NEO-GEO, AES, and MVS hardware, along with the NEO-GEO CD, and is also available via the Arcade Archives collection on Xbox One, PS4, and Nintendo Switch. And if you made it this far into the video, I thank you for checking this out. If you find these videos helpful, that's awesome. I'm glad you can use it as a resource. Check back often, we'll have more reviews and commentaries coming up in the near future. Until then, take it easy, stay safe out there. I'll see you on the next one.